Hello and welcome to another Force Lines Forever ladder cast. We have Nexus versus Mary on Gateway and Rose, a new 20 by 20 ladder map devised and built by none other than Bias, our resident grouch slash map maker. Now, this is actually a pretty good map in my opinion. Some folks have been grumbling about it, but I definitely don't want to focus on that aspect. I want to focus on how much I actually love this map. There are some interesting themes. We have naval play going around the circumference of the map, around the periphery, as you can see. No water towards the middle. In the middle, there is an island with some minimal mass extractor spots. It's minimal indeed, but it can be crucial to turn the tide of battle to take over the island. So naturally, the ACUs will go towards the middle. Let's get the game started. I'm delaying a little too much now. Nexus on the top side with Red Cybran. Indeed, this is going to be a Cybran mirror match. Mary, aka Thomas, on the bottom side of this rose looking island. He is in blue Cybran. Mary says, "Why aren't you playing Seraphim like all the cool kids?" I know you probably can't see the chat here. I did block it with some info that you may or may not be interested in seeing. Just in case, while I am casting, there's some unseemly writing. And I can't be bothered to edit it out in post. So I'll just use this overlay while recording. I apologize for any inconvenience this may cause. Anyway, back to the game. Thomas Hutt building his Hydro with 2 engineers and his ACU. Nexus actually building a couple P-gens before he walks over to the hydrocarbon power plant. Now, Thomas Hutt's going to build his power generators after the hydrocarbon. Looks like an air factory is queued up after 4 P-gens. So he's got 3 engineers and an ACU. A 4th engineer on the way to really power build this Tech 1 air factory. Nexus a little bit lax with this air factory. He's only building it with 2 engineers and an ACU. Rather, he prefers to send his initial engineers outwards towards the mexes. We can see that he has spread out with his engineers much more quickly than has Thomas. That said, Thomas will have more engineers nearby to transport over with his quicker air factory. So whether Thomas or Nexus will reach their expansion first, we'll see in a couple seconds. I think Thomas has the better build here, to be honest. His engineers reaching this hydrocarbon much more quickly than can those of Nexus. Thomas's engineers already on the way to the second island. I'm sorry, it's not really an island, it's more of a peninsula. But the second expansion, Thomas's ACU already has made landfall at the middle arena. Nexus has made his way over to the middle with one engineer. So far, it looks like he's going to concentrate his build power, his ACU's build power over here on the leftward island expansion. That also means that it looks like he's not eyeing the middle just yet with his ACU. It might be in the back of his mind for the future. After all is said and done, it looks like Nexus might end up having more mexes initially than Thomas. Or am I just bad at counting? Let's see, 17 mexes for Nexus, 14 for Thomas. Yeah, so Nexus with his build order, which involves sending a few engineers early on to these outer mexes. Looks like it enabled him to get a few more mexes towards the beginning, 4 minutes in. Thomas with the faster air factory. So far, not seeing too much benefit from that move. That said, both players pretty equal footing here. Both players will end up taking their expansions without much conflict, without much resistance from either player. Thomas is making his way up with his ACU. A curious move. I would have expected, with my limited knowledge of 1 versus 1 strategy, would have expected his ACU to perhaps travel towards the center with the intent of eventually going up this ramp, down this ramp rather, to perhaps put some pressure on this expansion. Instead, Thomas is heading up towards the top right peninsula, where his ACU might not really see much use. Not quite sure what he's planning, but certainly we should give the benefit of the doubt to the 2200 player. Now we can see that Thomas does have a more substantial air presence compared to Nexus. He already has Tech 2 air. Very important detail here. Working on his Tech 2 Pigeon. Nexus working on his Tech 2 air factory. Only 50% done with not too much assist from his engineers there, but look at Thomas, a swarm of engineers surrounding his Tech 2 air factory. Not to mention, he does have a couple more Tech 1 air factories as well. An engineer has managed to make landfall here. There was a transport. It looks like it was carrying 3 engineers total, but only 1 made it. Now this engineer sort of not much to do now, as there is a PD, a couple of engineers from Nexus. Thomas did manage to take the analogous plateau here with his engineers, PD and an anti-air, just like Nexus on this side. Nexus is traveling down this middle center. I'm not sure what to call it. We'll call it an arena. So Nexus is traveling down this arena with his Mantis, but Thomas probably going to be well prepared for that. He has 4 land factories there at the beachhead. Only a couple land factories for Nexus, though more are on the way. And looks like Nexus's ACU is starting to make his way towards the center as well. Thomas, perhaps... Oh, Thomas already has 2 Corsairs. Something I didn't even notice he was starting to accumulate, and just like that, Nexus loses a Tech 2 power generator, and that really does smart early in the game. 8 minutes in, losing that Tech 2 Pigeon to a couple Corsairs. Looks like Thomas took that play straight out of Bladier's playbook. Bladier, of course, not one to pull any punches when it comes to 1 versus 1. Bladier will basically use every sneaky tactic available to Cybran, which will definitely include Corsairs. And Thomas's play quite intense right now, building a few naval factories as well over here in the top right corner. And this presence is a little bit stronger than that of Nexus. Nexus only has 2 naval factories, and they're right next to each other. There's a little, what do you call this? I don't know what the geographic term is. Let's call it a lagoon. I don't know if that applies, but we can see there's kind of a choke point here. Seems like a flashpoint for some future naval skirmishes. Thomas has occupied this bottom left plateau, mirroring Nexus's base there. More Corsairs on the way. Oof, that's really annoying. Tech 2 Pigeon down for Nexus again from a very simple Corsair snipe. And now Thomas has pushed his way on up down this ramp of Nexus. Nexus does put up a strong enough defense, so this movement's not going to really proceed any further. Gunships out for Thomas, already restricting Nexus's mexes over here on the top side, and it's going to take a long time for Nexus to recover this. It's +6 mass. Really, quite a few mexes that are unbuilt for Nexus now, and it's going to take a while for Nexus to recover them, so well done by Thomas, using 1 or 2 gunships to just take out all of this mass income from Nexus. Meanwhile, Nexus is not. He's sitting relatively idle. No aggressive maneuvering from Nexus, though he is upgrading his mexes. Casting this game on Nexus' side has become kind of an exercise in alliteration, I think. It's a bit challenging to say Nexus and Mexus all the time, but we'll get through it. As you can see, Thomas getting the upper hand in many of these situations. Over here on the top left, island expansion, Thomas is just crushing these Tech 2 mexes of Nexus. And that puts him about 25 or more mass ahead per tick for Thomas. I shouldn't say tick. It's technically inaccurate, probably. More like per second of game time. So, Thomas's navy meeting no more resistance on the top right side. Looks like he's taken out both of Nexus's, not both, more than 2 now. He's just taken out all of Nexus's naval production over here on the top right. though Nexus does have a couple naval factories here, still active in production. That might change soon, though. 13 minutes in, Thomas already has a Tech 3 air factory. He is not letting up. The pressure continues. Nexus is so far behind now that I'm not sure if it's worth casting anymore. I don't know. Do I have to pretend that things are all okay for Nexus? I don't think I would convince any of you fine viewers any differently. The fact is, Nexus is so far behind. Thomas would have to leave his room, get a cup of coffee, maybe relieve himself, perhaps go through some Instagram stories, a couple of them, before sitting back down and addressing this game for Nexus to even have a snowball's chance of coming back. Alright, now I'm exaggerating a little too much. There's always hope for players that are 2200. It's easy for me to say that one thing or another, but I mean, my ladder rating is 1600 right now. I don't know Bubkus really. I just like to open my mouth and talk about what's going on that I see. Maybe parse what these pros are thinking. Attempt to, at least. Anyway, big skirmish in the middle. Flak should make short work of these gunships. Two of them already just... Whoa, all of them just get disintegrated by that flak. 2 flak, actually, on the field. Well done by Nexus. So this middle is going to be a thorn in Thomas's side now. What was all that talk about Thomas leaving the room and getting coffee? I don't know. That was then, and this is now. Nexus has almost completely taken over the middle arena. Not quite sure what happened. We saw earlier that Thomas had a decent portion of the middle, but Nexus's decision to go Tech 2 here, I think, caught Thomas a little bit off guard. And now Nexus does have quite a bit of reclaim available to him if he's able to defend this beachhead. But he does have a few mexes here that have succeeded in upgrading, and they're well protected now that Thomas has no land presence in the middle. Thomas has to rely almost entirely on his peripheral mexes. And even though Thomas was doing good work over here with these outlying islands, it didn't give him a big enough lead to really clinch the game. I apologize for calling the game so soon. It was really more for I'd say I'm more of a reactionary type kind of caster, you know, like I see one thing happening, I'll kind of automatically the sky is falling, that sort of thing. But you know, just looking at the map now, it kind of looks like Nexus is making a comeback. Not so much on his back foot like he was before. In fact, he has Tech 3 Air himself, which sort of explains why some folks have been saying that this is a good game. I originally was a little bit confused 13 minutes in when Thomas was already getting Tech 3 air with a substantial mass per second lead. I was wondering why this game was particularly outstanding. Kind of looked like a blowout, but now that I take a look at the map, Nexus really focusing on what matters. Just staying strong in the middle, upgrading his mexes. Not losing balance just from a couple of aggressive maneuvers from Thomas Height. And surely Nexus is putting in all of his effort, all of his brain power to figure out a way to tip the scale in his favor right now. Nexus takes a look at Thomas's base, 3 Tech 3 mexes, which is definitely a worrying sight, but let's face it, this is Nexus here. If anybody can catch up in mex count, it's the Mass Meister himself. Big Tech 3 air fight in the middle, relatively speaking. The biggest one we've had yet, but certainly not the biggest one anybody's really ever seen. If anybody watches Seaton's games, you know what I'm talking about. But this is one for the record books here in terms of this game alone. Thomas doing a little bit better in terms of maneuvering. I don't know where Nexus's ASFs are going, really. But I think I spoke too soon. Despite Nexus's kind of subpar ASF micro, Thomas manages to lose all of his ASFs over his own base. Kind of a worrying development for Thomas, I think. I don't know what this is. It looks like a drop, perhaps. I don't know how else these could have made it to Nexus's base. Must have been a drop. They're slowly making their way over, unbeknownst to Nexus. Or beknownst to Nexus. Yes, it was quite beknownst. A couple of Zeuses on the way. No, these are not Zeuses. Oh, they are Zeuses. Alright, Zeuses. Oh, this was a little bit of an overkill. Revenant. I don't think he needs that for defense. And it isn't for defense, but rather to perhaps take out a couple Tech 2 mexes. But Thomas sees it, very quickly intercepts them with his ASFs, or what's remaining of his ASFs. Well done by Thomas. A nice big 1600 mass chunk available now for his consumption. Even with that nice little reaction from Nexus, he does manage to lose a Tech 2 mex. I don't know if it was upgrading or not, but sad days if it was upgrading. Somehow Nexus in that small amount of time has overtaken Thomas in score. Now the score doesn't tell us too much, except except like with 90% certainty who is going to win the game. I think it's pretty accurate, the score. I don't even know how the score is calculated, but I notice that usually whoever has the highest score wins the game. So I'd say it's a pretty good predictor of who's in the lead. Now, Thomas was ahead in score before, so for a 10,000 point lead, I wouldn't say that the results are certain. One ASF battle will completely change the score, as you can see it just did right now. Whoa, man, that was a big comeback from Thomas. He did lose a lot of Tech 2 mexes, but in doing so, he is giving Thomas... Whoa, what just happened here? Thomas... Man, pay attention, man. Revenant right in front of his ASFs, like right in front of him, and he lets 2 Tech 2 mexes evaporate right from under his nose. Still, like I was saying, it shouldn't hurt Thomas too much. He has Tech 2 engineers nearby, and all of that Revenant wreck reclaim to be had. So Nexus didn't gain too much from those runs with that Revenant, with those Revenants rather. It kind of looks like Nexus has a decent portion of the map, maybe almost at least 66% of the map is Nexus's territory, but that's a little misleading. Thomas does have a lot more Tech 3 mexes, and Nexus does not have a strong foothold on the middle. He only has a few Tech 2 land units at most, so were Thomas to really desire the middle, desire it with all of his passions and all of his heart, I don't think it would be too much effort on his part to take it back. And Thomas's Revenants now have gained a couple targets over here on the left side. He's using them pretty conservatively though. They're returning to base. 2 Revenants on Thomas' side. 1 Tech 2 mech taken out by that Revenant. So these are relatively fresh Revenants. They haven't really done much damage. Thomas looks like he's I don't know if he's making any more, but where are these Revenants going? Now, Thomas building a whole line of naval factory here. I think we can see that eventually this game is gonna lean heavily towards Navy as the players stabilize their Tech 3 air. Neither of them will be able to gain much ground using air superiority. And that's where Navy use is gonna shine a lot more. Development in the middle, a little slow, but Thomas definitely has some ambitions here. A couple Wagners somehow sneak in. I didn't even notice that was happening. And this Tech 3 Mex is 40% done. If Nexus targets this Mex, man, that's a lot of income. Or that's a lot of mass wasted for Thomas. But no such thing is going to happen. Thomas makes short work of these Wagners, and in fact, it's going to be sort of a mass gift from Nexus. Well done by Thomas defending that developing Tech 3 Mex. And now we have mass incomes at 282 versus 263. Thomas ahead by about 20. Now 35 per second. But Nexus still in the game. Now, what is Thomas's goal from here on out? What is Thomas thinking he will need to do in order to really clinch this game? Well, first of all, this Navy development looks like he really does want to get a naval presence. But we do see these gunships here, these whalers, kind of does look like he's investing more into whalers than something like Tech 2 Navy. So these naval factories might just be to build all these frigates, kind of keep a buffer going to keep his islands safe, or at least safe for at least while he builds up his whalers. I don't know. Revenant's on the way now. Thomas sees an opening. ASF's engaging. Who has the better ASF micro? My money is on Thomas, though it does kind of look like Nexus has more ASFs. 44 for Nexus, and I can count 12 without even looking. Way fewer ASFs is basically what I'm trying to say from Thomas. So perhaps that was not the best move from Thomas to move in with his ASFs. He was trying to sneak in these Revenants, but was it worth it? I don't know. At least he was able to lose the Revenants over his own territory. So right now, a little bit of a worrying turn of events for Thomas. That ASF battle was actually kind of a massacre. So no more whalers for Thomas. That's just not going to work. Thomas better really has to focus on developing his ASFs or transitioning to Tech 2 Navy. He actually does have Tech 2 Navy. I was wrong. Already cruisers are out. But if Nexus makes whalers, cruisers aren't going to be able to do much to defend some of these bases. For example, well, if a cruiser is able to come into this lagoon here, he might be able to defend all of the bases here. So these little rivers, they're nice. They're nice to have. Which means that Navy is really more important than ever now. And in terms of Navy, I think Thomas does have the advantage. Look at just how many frigates he's pumping out. He has at least 100 naval factories. I can count them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 99. So many. It's incredible. Nexus does have a Tech 2 naval factory, but he doesn't have many Tech 1 naval factories. We'll see how that decision plays out soon. Torp bombers likely not having as much use in the shallow waters. Or is that not true? I don't know. These whalers are being pretty difficult for Thomas to deal with. I'm a little worried. Thomas has some whalers out himself and some cruisers making their way over to the north portion of the map, where if Thomas manages to make it to this location, Nexus's base is going to be a little bit in danger, but Nexus has no problem pumping out a bunch of torpedo bombers, so I don't think these cruisers are going to really be a threat. And at last, Thomas's Navy seems to get the upper hand here, even in spite of Nexus's torp bombers. And cruisers are on the way. Even whalers aren't going to be able to do much against all of these cruisers. And if Thomas does manage to push through with his navy here around this side, little by little, Nexus is going to be put into a dangerous position. Ultimately, it seems that Navy is going to be what wins the game. But Thomas really does have to be careful with his frigates. He shouldn't He shouldn't waste them. He has to retreat where his cruisers can protect them a little better. Over on the top right side, more cruisers coming out. Thomas is just pumping out those cruisers, and Nexus is reacting by building subs. What are they called? They're called Barracudas. Nexus is building a bunch of Barracudas. One Barracuda gonna turn into 2 Barracudas, and that's gonna turn into 3 Barracudas. It's gonna be madness for Thomas if he doesn't make some destroyers. Laser developing for Thomas right now. Nexus's whalers all tied up over here on the bottom left side, trying to defend against this naval push. But those whalers are sure are piling up. They ain't nothing to sneeze at if Thomas isn't careful. Those whalers can take down cruisers in a flash, and Thomas is gonna really have to build more. Really gonna have to coordinate sending those cruisers up. He's got to send a more concentrated number. Otherwise, he's gonna lose. He's gonna lose over here on the bottom left, and that's gonna. This bottom left is pretty important. Really important to this game right now. If Nexus wins on the bottom left, look at all this reclaim. It's now Nexus does not have much engineer presence over here on the bottom left. It's more Thomas, so all of this mass is going into Thomas's coffers. But we can see that Nexus air presence so strong here. Thomas is really not being careful with his frigates. Some of the frigates do sort of make their way in. They trickle in, but they're really not going to survive too long. 4 whalers still just whaling. They're just whaling. Just whaling on these frigates. Oh my gosh, their total mass killed is just bonkers right now. And Thomas doesn't really have much he's doing about it. Oh my gosh. Look at the swarm of torp bombers just non-stop coming in. But what is this? A whaler from Thomas Hylett. Oh, that's... Spoke a little too soon. Nice 1,000 mass chunk for Nexus to take. Now there's a few cruisers on the way on the top side too, but no destroyers. Now these Barracudas, they're gonna just slowly chip away at those cruisers. These cruisers, they're not gonna make it. They're not gonna make it to Nexus base. They're not gonna do much. Now these cruisers, they should all be over here on the bottom left, where Nexus is just tearing everything up. And this is gonna be a really important turning point, folks. This is where things are gonna get decided. This is the ultimate decision point. Now Thomas has a lot of mass. Boy, he could have built a Monkey Lord by now with all that mass. Monkey Lord could have just snuck up in the middle, maybe. Nothing Nexus wouldn't have been able to detect, of course. But what I'm saying is, Thomas should not be wasting all of his resources, sending him all over here to the bottom left to be taken out by Nexus's clearly superior air force. Now Nexus is starting to get an engineer presence down there too. Already several destroyers on the field. Look at this, 5 destroyers. It's really Thomas now that has to worry about Navy. And if Nexus wins air and Navy, then oh man, that's lights out for Thomas. That's lights out for Thomas. And Thomas suiciding his ASFs into Nexus's torp bombers. Some of these decisions by Thomas Hylett a little bit puzzling. Though, if we take a look at the top side of the map, we can see Thomas is making a couple ambitious drops where there is absolutely no air presence, no whalers, nothing. But just in the nick of time, 4 Revenants stream out of these air factories. These Revenants can take care of these bricks easy. Are they turning? Are they gonna come back? Does Nexus know about these bricks? No. Oh my gosh, Nexus has already traveled halfway across the map with 6 Revenants. Now, these Revenants can do a number on Thomas here right now. Thomas has to be careful. I think they're going for the SMD. That's why he's sending them straight there. But Thomas has 4 bricks in Nexus's base. And the payload... Oh, that is... Oof. That must have been a regular old Tech 2 shield there. Nexus easily taking out that nuke launcher. No problem. Oh my gosh. Oh, and all of this power evaporating in front of Thomas's eyes. There's so many Revenants. There's like 6 still alive. Those cruisers not being able to do anything to the Revenants' tough exterior. Not before all of Thomas's power is completely taken out. But, I mean, Thomas does have 4 bricks in Nexus's base. Nexus does realize that they're there, but I mean, he's building. Oh my goodness, 4 bricks. Nexus probably thought he had it in the bag when he took out those P-gens, and now Thomas with 4 bricks. These are MVP bricks over here. Oh my gosh, these bricks just... And Thomas still has all of them. I don't know if he started with 4 or 6 or what, but he still has 2 bricks. Nexus is building... he's building Zeuses to kill these bricks, and there's still more than half health. I don't know. At this point, I'm wondering if Zeuses were the best idea over here. I mean, they're still alive. They took out Nexus' entire base, and they're still kicking. Finally, after a million passes, is Nexus able to take those bricks out. Look at... his entire base is gone. Thomas still has 2 P-gens, and building 3 P-gens. He still has all of his mexes. 6 Revenants, I thought, did a substantial amount of damage, but in terms of cost to destruction ratio, I mean, Thomas won that one for sure. That was... Oh, I did not see this development happening. As soon as I saw those Revenants, it was lights out for Thomas, but then those bricks... Nexus has to be slapping himself so hard right now. I don't know if he can pay attention to the game. He has to spend all that time slapping himself. Oh my goodness, that was... Nexus has just lost all of his... well, most of his power. He's obviously rebuilding his power now. But I'm not quite sure how much damage that did overall, since I didn't pay attention to over here how much power he had. But Nexus, at this point, he does have some power back, plenty of mass to be had. But the big detail, the important detail, is that Nexus cannot replenish his ASFs. And yes, in fact, Nexus is struggling with power. He is struggling substantially with power. He has been. And, well, just now it looks like he's back online, but for all that long period of time, Nexus has not been able to produce anything. And that gives Thomas an edge over here on the bottom left with his Navy. Not to mention, Thomas has been able to pump out ASFs. Despite losing some power, Thomas still had a couple P-gens available even after those Revenants struck. And that means that he was able to continue to make ASFs. Now, I don't know who has more ASFs at this point. Nexus did have a pretty big lead earlier. Now he has 39 or so. Thomas has 22. So Nexus still ahead in ASF count, but he can't really leverage it. He has no air production, can't build any whalers, so Thomas has a lot of time before he will feel any effects of losing an ASF count. So Thomas resting easy. He's going to take all this reclaim over here on the bottom left. Oh my gosh, no naval presence for Nexus at all here. Just a bunch of Barracudas. Oh geez, well, I mean, Thomas doesn't have any destroyers is the issue for Thomas. Very puzzling decision to not make any destroyers whatsoever, but kind of amusing. Let's see. So he has 9 cruisers, and among this entire naval, his naval assets, he does not have a single destroyer. Interesting. Yet he powers on. Powers on almost to spite Nexus's Barracudas. Somewhat interesting here. Barracudas, of course, a hard counter to cruisers, but it's just the numbers. The numbers are the issue. Barracudas are not a hard counter to numbers. And that is what Thomas has at the moment. Thomas does have a strong land presence here in the middle as well, though Nexus has a Tech 3 HQ, so unless Thomas is, yeah, Thomas definitely not going to win the middle now, but my goodness, Thomas has 500 mass income. He's been upgrading all these mechs all this time as well. I'm actually a little bit surprised that at this point Thomas still hasn't. Oh, that's what I was about to talk about. Experimentals here. Where is it? There it is. I was looking for that Monkey Lord. I didn't see it. I was looking around for it, but Thomas did a good job of hiding it, since he just finished an entire Monkey Lord without me noticing. And well, some of the viewers may have noticed, but I will admit immediately that I don't have the keenest of vision here, and my attention really is drawn very quickly to the more sensational parts of the map. So little nuanced things like Monkey Lord development, you know, I won't notice that immediately, so I apologize. But there it is. The Monkey Lord is on its way. At least we saw it before it headed out. And this Monkey Lord will change everything in the middle. It'll change everything. Nexus's small lead with his Tech 3 land in the middle, completely countered by this Monkey Lord. And if Thomas is able to reach Nexus's base over here with that Monkey Lord, it is 100% without a doubt. I know there's been a lot of doubt throughout this entire game about who the winner was, but this time, if that Monkey Lord makes it over here, there's no doubt that Thomas will be the winner of this game. So Thomas's, what was that? Okay, he built another Monkey Lord. Okay, so what? It's just, you know, he's just mass producing Monkey Lords now. I think already at this point Thomas is feeling it. Thomas feels the victory. Doesn't feel the need to build any destroyers, but some are on the way now. Thomas realizing that cruisers probably not a good counter to Barracudas, so he's sending off some destroyers to take care of that. Monkey Lord stymied slightly by these Tech 1 point defense. Oh, what's that? Where did that? Oh, Nexus built a nuke launcher. I thought I saw an SMD, but I did not see the SML. So if you watch my casts, rest assured you won't know what's going on until it's right at your doorstep. Here comes the nuke from Nexus. I had no idea he was building an SML. All of Thomas's power, is it all centralized? Because he just lost all of his power. Yep, Thomas hasn't been building any power, it looks like. And now, oof, that is painful. Thomas has not built any power outside of that main base, and he's been having a little too much fun building Monkey Lords, so I don't think he noticed that SML. Maybe he did. He made no effort, like 0 effort, to do anything about that SML, so he may not have noticed it after all. Building another Monkey Lord over here, in addition to the one here, so that's interesting. I mean, that's nice if they're able to finish it, but with that nuke, production has slowed down just a little bit, let's put it that way. Now he's reclaiming it so he can build more power plants. How sad. Let's take a look here. Oh, Nexus has built an experimental unit now. Oh, I'm getting dizzy over here. What is going on? Nexus with his own spider bot, which means that, oh, still now Thomas with, remember he built 2 Monkey Lords, so, and a 3rd one on the way almost. He just has to build those P-gens back. I'm getting dizzy from all of this action, and Nexus now recovering his navy. Thomas made a huge mistake by not building destroyers earlier. Losing all of those cruisers somewhat unnecessarily. 2 Monkey Lords are now on their way though, and I don't know, a lot of things going well for Nexus with that SML, with him being able to defend the Navy, but he's just a little bit behind in all fronts, and majorly behind in the middle with this Monkey Lord. So Thomas has 4 Monkey Lords now. This is just comical. 4 Monkey Lords on a 20 by 20 map. Now that's pretty common to see on something like Seaton's, but not a 1 versus 1 game. Building 4 Monkey Lords. But we might see more of that happening on Gateway and Rose, as this map seems to encourage this kind of trajectory in the game. Nexus does appear to have the upper hand over here on the bottom left, though he does have he has a ways to go. There is going to be resistance all the way to Thomas's main base, and it's going to take a long time. Probably a lot longer than it will take for these Monkey Lords to clean up shop over here. Now Nexus does succeed in building another Monkey Lord within that span of time that Thomas took to make his way up from the middle. However, Thomas has 4 Monkey Lords, let's remember. Not all together, but 4 Monkey Lords in total. And that gives me a little bit more confidence in Thomas's ability. Despite one of his Monkey Lords being almost critical health, that 3rd Monkey Lord is on the way, and that's a big deal now. Thomas, known to be a little bit conservative with his experimentals. For reference, please see Thomas versus Bladier on Open Palms, played recently. I won't get too far into that, but too much into that to not spoil it, but Thomas, is he still powering out those Monkey Lords? Let's take a look here. No more Monkey Lords queued up here in the middle, or in this core base. It looks like Thomas, for now, has paused construction of those Monkey Lords, but what is he working on now? He's working on a Tech 3 air factory, something he should have done a little bit earlier, but better late than never, as they say. Nexus well on his way to Tech 3. He has Tech 3 HQ easily. Now the issue is the Monkey Lords. There's gonna be a big one coming up, and now a few minutes later, Thomas has regained Navy. I think it took just a couple cycles of his naval factories to, I guess, reinforce his frigates. Look how many frigates he has all of a sudden. Boy, that is just God King Xerxes level frigate production. And Bladir having to spend a lot of resources over here building Monkey Lords. Perhaps he had to make fewer frigates or something. I don't know. He does have a lot of mass in the bank. Another nuke on the way. Thomas has not made any efforts to build SMD anywhere, really. Though he could sorely use one, it's not something that he's interested in, clearly. Now that nuke, a little too close for comfort for his commander, but the commander does make it out in time. And that's not the best target for Nexus. Nexus probably should have taken out this area. Because Thomas really not really short on any mass. It's the power that will delay Thomas. That said, Thomas has power everywhere, so any target for Nexus would have been probably deficient. Now this is a good move from Thomas, putting pressure on Nexus to build more Monkey Lords. Nexus just simply does not have the economy to support building both Monkey Lords and Navy, whereas Thomas, this whole time, really, for the past 10 minutes or so, or more, Thomas has had a mass advantage. In fact, I'd confidently say that for the most of the game, Thomas has had a mass advantage, and it's really been a matter of leveraging his map control, I guess, to take the game. And but he's done a good job of protecting his assets, so he has really never, very rarely has he fallen behind behind Nexus in mass income, which has allowed him to make more, allowed him more leisure with decision making. Now these three Monkey Lords tying up the three over here, while this third Monkey Lord coming from the flank. And now Nexus's Monkey Lords having to rush back to defend. These Monkey Lords will make short work of the single one if Thomas doesn't come back with his three Monkey Lords. I think Thomas should turn back with those three, but really, it doesn't matter at this point. Thomas has reached Nexus's base with that single Monkey Lord. It's too late now for Nexus to recover. Navy right at Nexus's doorstep. This is pretty much all in one go. Thomas has taken the game, it looks like. And this isn't one of those slow burns either. This was really sudden. In the past 10 minutes, I think, I wasn't entirely sure who was going to win, but I think it may have been developing. Some more keen viewers might have sensed Thomas winning a little bit earlier, but for me, it was kind of neck and neck until the last 10 minutes, I think. Anyway, geez, well played by both players. Some nail-biting stuff there, especially when Nexus came in with those Revenants. That was a trip. Nexus, when those Revenants came out and those bricks were about to make landfall, well, I thought perhaps Nexus, if he noticed those bricks, he would have just completely wiped them all out with those Revenants. Easy. But they went straight for Thomas's base, where a nuke was about to... a nuke was only halfway done with building a nuke. The SML, I mean. And Nexus, in a rush to take it out, came down upon Thomas with the might of 10 of Thor's hammers with those Revenants, but in fact, they made another pass, taking out a bunch of Thomas's power, and then I was weeping for Thomas at that point. I was weeping. It looked like it was curtains for Thomas, but then we remembered Thomas has those bricks, and boy, was Nexus unprepared for those. That That was Nexus's Achilles heel, and I think that's a really apt comparison this time. It was certainly an Achilles heel. Those four bricks, so simple, such low firepower in the grand scheme of things, yet so precisely targeted at Nexus's production. Nexus was really about to take control of the game. Now, Thomas did have a lot of mass income at that point too, but with those revenants roaming about freely and Nexus having air, really Nexus it would have been a combo. That those revenants wouldn't have been the end of it. Nexus would have just kept on pumping out revenants, whalers, chipping away at Thomas's production. Winning Navy here, it would have been easy for Nexus had he had that production over here at the top, but those four bricks just, man, slicing out Nexus's, I don't want to get too graphic for you folks here, but just, he crippled Nexus, sure thing over here at the top at his core base, and Thomas really didn't let go. He went for the jugular and he didn't let go. So well played by Thomas there, and really strong play from Nexus. Really going toe to toe with Thomas during what looks to be a meteoric rise to the top. Nexus attempting to stand in the way, attempting to challenge Thomas as he goes for top 3 in the leaderboards. But it wasn't meant to be. Thomas's destiny, it seems to be, has already been carved out. Thomas is top 3 now, by the way. And I encourage you to watch his other games, much of which were against Bladier, one of the premier 1 versus 1 ladder players of Forest Alliance, and so please watch those games. They're epic, and thanks for watching this one. And yeah, see you in the next cast, and be safe out there.